After a fire in a high-rise apartment block in China killed 10 people, a new generation took to the streets of Shanghai and the capital, demanding changes to the Chinese government's harsh COVID rules, which many feel contributed to those deaths, and which have kept Chinese citizens shackled for the best part of 3 years. Here are 5 things you need to know about China's controversial zero-COVID strategy. While the rest of the world returns to some form of normal, China has continued to impose its extremely tough strategy, also known as Dynamic Zero, taking action to eradicate the virus wherever it flares up. Measures include imposing strict local lockdowns even with only a handful of cases, mass testing where cases have been reported, isolation at home or in a quarantine facility, businesses and schools closed, shops must also close except for those selling food, and lockdowns last until no infections are reported. Some local authorities have even forced workers to sleep inside factories so they can work while quarantined. China's government says their draconian policies save lives, but unsurprisingly, the measures have been stifling the economy. Lockdowns have led to factories and ports being shut for long periods and have also impacted work with foreign companies. Unemployment is rising, especially amongst young people, and the property market is weakening. As a result, China's economy has grown by only 3.9% over the past year, compared with its target of 5.5% for 2022. China's weekend COVID protesters say they've been contacted by police as authorities begin clamping down. On Monday, planned protests in Beijing were quashed when officers surrounded the assembly point. In Shanghai, large barriers were erected along the main protest route, and police made several arrests. And shockingly, a BBC journalist was beaten and kicked by Chinese police officers behind closed doors after being arrested while covering an anti-lockdown protest in Shanghai. President Xi's infamous censorship machine is going into emergency mode to stop its citizens seeing protests in multiple Chinese cities. The words Shanghai and Urumqi, cities where residents have protested, have been added to a list of censored search terms by platforms like Weibo, one of China's biggest social networks. And reports on the country's COVID outbreak over the last few days have been muted, with news outlets focusing on upbeat stories like China's latest achievements in space. Around the world, COVID vaccines were hailed as the route back to normality. For China, not so much. Only about half of China's over 80s have received their first vaccinations, and less than 60% of those aged 60 to 69 are fully vaccinated. And there are doubts over whether China's main vaccines, Sinovac and Sinopharm, are effective against Omicron, the most widespread strain. The West has offered more effective vaccines, but China has refused to use them. Xi Jinping is one of the most powerful leaders China has had since Chairman Mao. He cracked down on dissent and got the 2-term limit removed so he could become president for a 3rd time. So although China is finally beginning to display a shift in its COVID stance, can Xi be trusted not to impose further lockdowns in the future?